Chapter 3.1. Several days had passed already since the opening ceremony ended. The weekend came and went, and it was now Monday. A peaceful life here at school. A regular routine that repeated itself over and over. The most momentous change at the start of this new year was that the blackboards were now digital and all our textbooks had been replaced with tablets. Last week, we'd looked down at our hands, which held the new tablet devices that had just been handed out to us. The fact that the textbooks we were using had all been replaced by tablets illustrated just how remarkable the spread of e-books was. Each student was given their own tablet, and newly installed high-speed charging devices were in the back of the classrooms. We were also provided with portable battery packs as well, in the unlikely event that our tablets died in the middle of class. We were forbidden to bring the tablets themselves back to the dorms, but we were allowed to transfer any data we needed over the school's network to access it from our rooms. The annoyingly high number of textbooks we needed to lug around were now all stored neatly inside this 12-inch tablet as data. Not only did this mean we could freely work with graphics and photos, but the tablets were also an effective response to globalization, allowing us to openly communicate back and forth with people from other countries, such as in English class. Considering that this school was overseen by the government, it seemed they were lagging somewhat behind in implementing these changes. However, it remained unclear for now whether or not these changes were necessarily the correct decision. I supposed we'd understand their impact better after seeing how these children grew, and how they integrated into society in the future. The scope of our studies as second-year students would be more difficult than in our first year, of course. I didn't know exactly how this school compared to other high schools in that regard, but it was safe to assume it was above average, at the very least. I wondered how much students like Sudu and Ike would be able to keep up with their studies on their own. If we wanted to make sure not a single student got expelled, it might be more essential than ever for us to support each other. At any rate, while the biggest change came in the form of the digitization of our study materials, there were a number of other things to note. If I had to mention one, it would be the ability to change seats, by way of using your private points to secure the spot that you want. I moved from my old spot near the window toward a seat on the opposite side of the classroom, in the back by the hallway. Apparently, the seats near the hallway were generally unpopular because of all the people coming, but it didn't really bother me all that much. Also, while I'd been occasionally passing new students more and more often of late, I obviously still hadn't actually talked to any of them yet, not being involved in any club activities. As a result, nothing about my personal situation had really changed. I supposed that wasn't so strange, considering that when I was a first year, the first time I actually had a proper conversation with a senior student was for a special exam, since that student had access to old test materials. At any rate, the first few days of the new school year had been quiet. "Is everyone present?" asked our homeroom instructor Chabashira, striding into the classroom at almost the exact moment the bell rang. As our morning homeroom began, she stood at the teacher's podium with a serious expression on her face. That, coupled with the fact that we didn't have any classes for first and second period today, made me predict something was going to happen. Apparently, this brief moment of peace was about to come to an end. "Sensei, is there a special exam?" asked Ike, before our homeroom instructor made her announcement. It sounded like he was asking out of a sense of eager restlessness, rather than because he was messing around. And Chabashira understood that, which was why she didn't seem to object to him asking. In the past, every time a special exam was announced, most of the students understandably felt anxious. But now those special exams were unavoidable obstacles we had to overcome on our path to the top. And our class was getting ready to face those challenges. "I'm sure you're worried about that, but before we get into that discussion, there's something I'd like for you to do. Something that will be particularly important to how you lead your lives here at this school in the future," said Chabashira. She took out her cell phone, continuing to speak while showing it to us. "Please take out your phones and place them on your desk, everyone. If anyone has forgotten their phone, I ask that you go and retrieve it immediately." "But it seems as though no one has forgotten their phone," said Chabashira. Cell phones were essential everyday items. You might even say they were the most important objects of all, being something you kept on you at all times. Before long, Chabashira had verified that 39 phones had been placed out on the desks. She resumed speaking once more. "First, I'd like you all to go to the school's official website and install a new application. It should be available for download at this time. Though the official name for the app is Overall Ability, it will just show up as OA on your phone after you've installed it," explained Chabashira. A live-action demonstration video with text captions popped up on the Blackboard screen and started to play. I suppose this was one of the conveniences now afforded to us, thanks to the digitization of our classroom. After following along with what Chabashira told us and what the instructions on the screen showed, I installed the app on my phone. It created an icon that had both the acronym GOEA on it as well as what looked like an illustration of the school. After you've finished installing the app, please put down your phones. Please raise your hand if there's something you're having trouble understanding. The process was quite simple. Everyone was used to handling a phone, so no one struggled with this, and things proceeded smoothly. You Class D students aren't the only ones being asked to install this app. Right now, everyone in school, across every grade level, is being asked to do so. This app is truly remarkable. It will certainly benefit the students of the Advanced Nurturing High School in a multitude of ways in the days to come. But seeing is believing, as they say, so please boot up the app, said Chabashira. I tapped the icon and launched the app. When I did so, my phone's camera automatically came on. By scanning your student ID with your camera, the initial setup will be completed automatically, explained Chabashira. Following her instructions, I held my student ID card out in front of the camera. It scanned the information on it, like my profile photo and student ID number, then continued the login process. Now, you should all have successfully created your own individual accounts. Moving forward, you won't need to log in anymore. But because your account is tied to your phone, we do ask that you take extra care not to lose it. After finishing the login process, several different options were displayed. This upholds personal data for the entire school. For example, if you select second-year Class D, your names will be displayed in standard order. Try it out, said Chabashira. Sure enough, profile pictures and full names for all 39 students were displayed in order. You are free to look at any profile, but it would probably be a good idea for you to tap on your own name first, said Chabashira. I tapped on my name just as she had suggested. I had expected that I'd see only basic information like my date of birth, but that didn't seem to be the case. What was displayed were items and number values that I haven't ever seen before. Ayanokojikiyotaka. First-year results: academic ability, C, 51, physical ability, C+, 60, adaptability, D+, 37. Societal contribution, C+, 60, overall ability, C, 51. Sensei, my results look like they've kind of turned into, like, stats in a video game or something, shouted Ike. That's right. These are your own individual performance scores, calculated by the school based on your achievements through the end of your first year here. You aren't the only class who is able to access this information. It's possible for students to view performance scores for students in other classes as well. In fact, any student in any grade level can do so. This system was adopted because it was deemed to be important for the future of your education, said Chabashira. In other words, the app's purpose was to provide an overview of everyone's individual performance scores, represented as numerical data. It also seemed like it could be used to send public messages to all students. There was a question mark in the upper right part of the screen, along with the word description. When I pressed it, detailed information about each item was displayed. Academic ability, calculated mainly based on scores on written exams, etc., given throughout the year. Physical ability, calculated based on evaluations from physical education classes, activity in clubs, and evaluations from special exams, etc. Adaptability, calculated based on your ability to adapt to society around you. This includes things such as how many friends you have, your position in your social circle and your communication skills, whether you can think on your feet, etc. Societal contribution, calculated based on a variety of factors, such as your attitude in class, including any lateness or absences on your record, whether you've exhibited any problematic behavior, contributions made to the school via membership on the student council, etc. Overall ability, students' overall abilities are derived from the four values above. However, the effect that the social contribution score has on this calculation is reduced by half. Asterisk note, method for calculating overall ability. Academic ability plus physical ability plus adaptability plus social contribution x 0.5, divided by 350 by 100, rounded up to the nearest whole number. I see. Based on the criteria, it made sense that my adaptability score would be lower than the others. And when it came to the number of friends I had and my communication skills, well, I wasn't exactly flourishing there. If the other scores were evaluated based on what they typically saw from me, those numbers seemed reasonable, too. There were also fields for my scores for my second and third year evaluations in addition to my first year, but those were currently blank. Right now, only the scores for your first year are displayed. But now that you've begun your second year, your new evaluations will be given to you as they are assessed by the school, the scores being updated as time goes on. Scores will be updated at the beginning of the month, just like with class points. For example, Sudu, your current academic ability score is E. However, if you happen to get a perfect score on the next written exam, you would be given an A+ on your second-year evaluations page, said Chabashira. Which meant our second-year evaluations would be separate from the first-year evaluations. Our scores for this year would be evaluated based only on the events of this year. This also meant our scores over the course of the year were constantly being recorded. Even if Suda got a perfect score in a written exam in April and got an A+ for his academic ability score, if he got a 0 on the next written exam after that, he'd end up with AC rating. That was how things would be over the course of the year. And then, our final average scores would be calculated at the end of the year. One of the things worth noting about this app was that we weren't just able to check scores for our own class, but could look up the other classes too. Up until this point, I couldn't know anything about students I'd never interacted with unless I directly went out and gathered that information. But now, with only a glance, I could see names, faces, and what kind of scores someone had, regardless of what grade level they were in. Incidentally, the data for the new first-year students seemed to be based on information from their third year of junior high and from their entrance exams. So, academic ability, physical ability, and societal contribution rankings aside, it was possible their current adaptability scores might not be all that accurate. A handy tool for checking grades. Well, no. There was no way that was all there was to it. It was obvious this was going to play some kind of key role. I'm sure that the students who got rather unsatisfactory results aren't thrilled about the idea of having their records retained like this. However, those students simply need to come to terms with the fact that they were the ones who spent their first year that way, explained Chabashira. Basically, the closer your precious academic and physical ability scores were to E, the more disgraced you would be. However, your first-year scores are nothing more than a past record. They will have no effect whatsoever on how you are assessed in the future as second-year students. Which means it's especially important that those of you who got disappointing results in your first year take this opportunity to re-evaluate your priorities. By visualizing your scores this way, we're hoping you'll be encouraged to grow into your best selves, she added. I suppose that if our individual scores were going to be continuously recorded in an app that anyone could see from this point onward, many students would want to make an effort to make themselves look better. I was sure that would be effective to a certain degree when it came to prompting students to get their grades up, as Chabashira had said, but... Sensei, why is the evaluation metric for societal contribution a little bit different from the other three items, though? Asked Hirata Yusuke. The effect of our societal contribution score on our overall ability score was half as much as the others. Hirata had his concerns about that, which was why he asked that question. Academic ability, physical ability, and adaptability. The school considers those three categories to be extremely important. Societal contribution, on the other hand, is a little different, said Chabashira. It is fundamentally based on morals and manners. It's an assessment of how you conduct yourselves as students, examined from every possible angle. Things like how influential your voice is in a group or how often you're correct. Things like how you talk to and behave in front of your teachers and whether you have any tardy arrivals or absences on your record. Whether or not you comply with various rules. Because these are basic skills and common courtesies you should naturally be striving toward anyway, their impact on your overall ability score is reduced. So unlike the other three categories, which you couldn't dramatically improve overnight, we could greatly improve our societal contribution scores if we changed our attitudes from this day onward. That was the difference. This app is impartial. It doesn't matter if you're in a higher or lower level class. Everyone is assessed similarly. Right now, if a student has a high overall ability evaluation, it's safe to assume that person has successfully achieved something worthy of praise. The list was arranged in order by name, but there was a sort feature too. So I didn't need to look at each student one by one to know who had the highest overall ability scores in Class 2D. After trying out the sort function, I saw Yusuke had the top score. Hirata Yusuke. First year results: academic ability, B+, 76, physical ability, B+, 79, adaptability, B, 75. Societal contribution A 85. Overall ability B plus 78. You could understand Yusuk's excellence with just one glance at his scores. These scores were nothing to scoff at. He was above average in every area. If he hadn't openly exposed the weakness in his heart towards the end of our first year, his scores might have even been a little higher. On the other hand, after choosing to sort students in descending order of overall ability, I saw Ike held the number 1 spot. His overall ability score was 37. He was actually tied with Sakura Eri, who also had an overall ability score of 37. Sudu, who was considered by many to be the most likely candidate for the lowest score, actually appeared to have scored better than several students. Sudu-kan. First-year results: academic ability, E plus 20, physical ability, A plus 96, adaptability, D plus 40. Societal contribution, E plus 19, overall ability, C 47. His academic ability and societal contribution scores were quite low, thanks in part to his unruly behavior in the first year. However, his high physical ability assessment was enough to compensate for that, letting him avoid being the worst-ranked student. I did a little digging in the app and found he was the only student in our grade level that had gotten an A+ assessment in the physical ability category. Suda's academic ability had improved since he had started school here, and he'd also been demonstrating mental and emotional growth. It seemed likely his scores would greatly improve from this year onward. Also, though this has nothing directly to do with Class D, a certain exception has been made for someone in your grade level. Sakayanagiarisu, from Class 2A, will have her physical ability score set at the same value as the student with the lowest score in the grade level, explained Chabashira. Sakayanagiarisu had a physical disability that required her to use a cane to walk around normally. Meaning, even if she wanted to exercise, it wasn't something she could really do. I supposed it wasn't like they could entirely omit her physical ability score and still calculate her overall score, so it was a reasonable decision to place her at the bottom of the rankings. At any rate, this tool for visualizing abilities might be considered essential to implementing the true meritocracy Nagumo had been advocating for. I'm sure this app will serve as a valuable tool, not just in getting you to change the way you see your grades, but also by getting you to interact with your fellow students, since you'll be able to familiarize yourself with their names and faces regardless of grade level. However, well, in my opinion, that's not all. This is just my personal speculation, but I'm thinking students who fail to keep their overall ability score above a certain level may be hit with a certain penalty or something to that effect, said Chabashira. Penalty? Wait, you couldn't mean expulsion, do you? That is a possibility. But as I just said, that's just my personal speculation. It may not be true. Still, I think it's fair to assume that the closer your overall ability score is to E, the greater the risks you face, said Chabashira. At this current point in time, Ike and Eri had the worst scores in class, with an overall ability score close to E. If they spent this year like they had the last one, they'd be in imminent danger. I'm sure some of you might have issues with how the school has evaluated you versus how you have evaluated yourself. However, this is just the school's current evaluation of you. If you're unhappy about it, then show them what you've got. Do your best this year to convince the school to change their minds about you. Remember, the school isn't all-knowing and omnipotent or anything, said Chabashira. But how are we supposed to show them, sensei? Wailed Ike, raising his hand in a panic after having confirmed that he was indeed ranked at the bottom. Well, here's one way. There is admittedly a difference in accuracy when it comes to evaluating the physical abilities of a student who does participate in club activities versus a student who does not. If you're feeling confident in yourself, try joining a club, said Chabashira. She was saying that students who directly demonstrated what they could do to the school were more likely to be given more favorable treatment. However, students were still evaluated on a case-by-case basis. If one of them tried to show off too much or too carelessly, it could lead to problems. It's almost like we're each fighting individual battles, muttered Horikita under her breath. Chabashira didn't miss what Horikita said. It seemed like the introduction of this app completely negated the kind of battles we'd been fighting so far together as a class. I was sure Horikita wasn't the only one who felt that way. Well, that's both incorrect and correct. This system, which is to be introduced starting this year, was proposed by the current Student Council President, Nagumo Miyabi. School administrators approved and adopted it, said Chabashira. So Nagumo's dream of creating a system where individuals were assessed on their own merits had been realized. I was guessing the reason he didn't make that many moves last year was because it took quite a bit of time and effort to get this app off the ground. But the fundamental concept remains unchanged. The school is expecting you to work together as a class, just as you've done so far. Please don't forget that point, and continue to do your best, day after day, said Chabashira. After we finished installing the app and Chabashira finished giving us her explanation, our first period was to an end. Now that we had recess, students began to stare at their phones, noses glued to their screens. I was sure they wanted to see their own scores, as well as the scores of their classmates and students from the other classes. Well, I really don't like that they're treating me like I have less common sense than Koenji, of all people, shouted Sudo after looking intently through the app, glaring at Koenji as he did. After I heard him say that, I decided to check for myself, while still keeping my ears open, though he was speaking so loudly that I could overhear pretty easily anyway. Koenji Rokasuk first-year results: academic ability, B 71, physical ability, B+, 78, adaptability, D 24. Societal contribution, D 25, overall ability, C 53. Given the fact that Koenji had demonstrated a fair amount of proficiency regularly during class and on tests, he had scored highly in both academic ability and physical ability. What? Come on, dude, it's like, whatever, right? Sides, you're way better than he is when it comes to physical ability, man, Ike grumbled, his jealousy clear in his voice, since he didn't excel in any particular area. That's probably only cause Koenji doesn't take anything seriously. Though I hate to admit it, said Sudo. Just as Sudo had suggested, Koenji's physical abilities were exceptionally high. Off the charts even. He had potential equal to or greater than Sudo's, but he wasn't involved with any clubs and his participation in things like physical education class was wildly irregular, since it depended largely on his mood. If he wasn't personally interested in something, he would skip it without a moment's hesitation or might even suddenly abandon it. It also wasn't all that uncommon for him to just not lift a finger in the first place. In contrast, Sudo always took things seriously no matter the task. The results he achieved in that arena had put him at the top of the class. It was no wonder there was a huge gap in their assessments, even though they had similar physical ability. The part that Sudo got tripped up on was societal contribution. In other words, the category that was all about manners and morals. In that regard, Koenji, who was being singled out by Sudo right now, was just as much a problem child as Sudo. It seemed Sudo was really unhappy with the fact that he'd scored lower than Koenji, even though it was only by a small margin. It wasn't like I didn't understand why he might want to complain, but I was guessing the reason Koenji had scored higher than Sudo in societal contribution was because he hadn't had as many opportunities to act to the detriment of the class or the school in general. It was no surprise that Sudo, given his suspension and violent outbursts and such, had scored lower. Even though Koenji had heard everything Sudo was saying, he acted as though it had nothing to do with him. He hadn't even bothered looking at the OEA app more than what was strictly necessary, while everyone else seemed totally engrossed by it. I suppose that after spending more than a year here at this school, the thing that had changed the least was probably Koenji. Anyway, we could now visualize what our grades were like for our first year. This move by the school, the introduction of this app, presented both advantages and disadvantages. For example, the existence of an overall ability category now provided a provisional ranking for the students in class. If a rather inconvenient special exam took place now, it wouldn't be necessary to answer the question of who should step forward as a candidate for possible expulsion. The students with low overall ability scores would be the ones we'd focus on. Ike and Eri, since she was tied with him at dead last in the rankings, had to be very anxious right now. Like they were on pins and needles.